Living in ignorance is the most unpleasant thing of all. It can be hard to admit that one is tired of marriage and no longer feels love for a person. Instead, the person may cheat and do stupid things. My wife lost control of herself and got caught cheating. I had an opportunity to have a little fun. My name is Craig Johnson. I've been married to Caroline for 17 years. I believed she loved me completely, but it turns out I knew nothing about the last 6 years of her life. She was having an affair with her boss, the owner of the real estate firm where she works. We have 3 children, a 16-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and a beautiful little girl who just turned 2. I love them all very much except for my wife. By the way, I'm a detective sergeant. About 2 months ago, my youngest daughter fell at daycare and my wife couldn't pick her up. So Dad came to the rescue. I rushed to the spot in my squad car, its headlights flashing in the dark. As I ran up to my daughter, I saw that she was eating a lollipop and sobbing. I looked her over, kissed her, and ruffled her hair. I left her laughing and walked over to the head of the daycare center. She told me about the accident. My daughter had fallen and cut herself, so an ambulance had already been called. I sat down next to my daughter, and soon she was laughing again. When the EMTs arrived, they advised me to take her to the emergency room for stitches. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. Attempts to contact my wife were unsuccessful. The call went to voicemail. I sent a text message and used an app to find her smartphone, since Lenny lost it often. The app indicated she was at the Holiday Inn, just 7 miles away. I stayed with my daughter at the hospital while the doctor stitched her up. When the procedure was complete, we filled out the necessary paperwork. Then I got a folding child seat out of the trunk, placed it in the back seat, and secured my daughter there. After that, we went looking for her mother. At that point, my stomach started to rebel over the hero sandwich I had eaten for lunch. I quickly ran out into the parking lot to calm my stomach. Just at that moment, I saw Carolyn and her boss, Arthur Ashe, coming out of the hotel lobby. They were walking hand in hand. His left hand was resting on her back. They laughed and smiled at each other. Then she kissed him. It was the same kiss she usually gave me. I stopped my Ford and adjusted the dashboard camera to continue watching. They approached her Lincoln Aviator. Carolyn turned to him and kissed him passionately. It was an unexpected maneuver. She then pulled out of her pocket the underwear I had given her for our anniversary, smiled, and handed it to him. They laughed again and kissed. After that, she got into her car and drove off. Suddenly, her car stopped abruptly and I saw the brake lights come on. At that moment, my cell phone rang. The display showed Caroline's name. I answered in an even tone of voice. "Hi, Caroline. What's wrong? Where are you?" She asked apprehensively. "I'm at the hospital. The baby's fine. Where are you?" "I couldn't get through," I replied. "Oh, I'm at the office. I'm on my way to the hospital now," she lied to me. "Be careful on the road," I said and hung up. I continued to watch her car as she tried to call 2 more times. I switched all calls to voicemail. She trotted forward and almost crashed into the pickup truck. I grinned as I watched the scene unfold. When I got home, I listened to the messages and called a friend who works as a private investigator. I told him we needed to talk as soon as I got home. I then carried the sleeping child inside the house and then went back to my car and got 4 DNA collection kits. I swabbed the baby's mouth, placed the swab in a container, sealed it, and labeled a plastic bag. I then grabbed a can of iced tea and called work to talk to my supervisor, the chief of detectives. I explained that I needed the rest of the week off to take care of some family business. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I just need to take care of some kid-related stuff," I replied. "Okay, just keep me posted," he said. "Got it, Chief," I replied. 20 minutes later, a woman I had no desire to see showed up. Her appearance made me uncomfortable, but I took a deep breath and started counting to 10. I had only gotten to 7 when she burst through the door. "Where is she?" she screamed. I asked her to calm down because the baby was sleeping. She walked past me into the baby's room. I started making a to-do list for the next day: divorce lawyer, private investigator, electronics store. She ran out of the bedroom and started questioning me about what had happened. "Shashi fell, but she's fine," I said. "She only got 4 stitches, and the doctor said there will be hardly any scars." "Why didn't anyone call me?" she asked. "They tried, honey, but they couldn't get through." "I tried too," I said. Then the phone went to voicemail. "So where have you been, honey?" I asked. She started to stutter and looked away. "I was in a meeting." "I turned my phone off so it wouldn't interfere with the meeting," she said. I suggested that next time, instead of turning it off, put it on vibrate. I was just glad that nothing serious had happened to the kids. Seeing my relief, Caroline's face darkened, then turned pale. "I never thought of that," she said. "Of course not, dear," I thought to myself. At that moment, our other children returned from school. Marissa, 16, and 12-year-old Junior stopped in the living room and looked at us. "What's up, Daddy?" my son asked. Marissa gave his mother a cold look, but told me everything was fine. "Yeah, your sister fell in kindergarten and cut herself and had to get stitches in the emergency room. I was with her," I explained. "Where were you, Mom?" Marissa asked. "I was at a meeting," Caroline muttered. "My daughter must have suspected something." Junior threw his mother a meaningful look. "Mom," he said. Caroline shivered and blushed. "I need to take a shower," she said. I couldn't resist asking, "You didn't shower this morning?" She faltered and looked at me as if she wanted to make me vaporize. "Get over it, Cray," she hissed and went upstairs. I turned back to my kids. Their faces were full of confusion and sadness. "It'll be okay, guys. It's just a fight," I comforted them. Marissa said, "Well, if you say so, Daddy." Junior just shook his head. "How about pizza?" I suggested. I called and ordered 2 large pizzas, one with pepperoni and one with mushrooms. 30 minutes later, the pizzas were delivered. The kids, including little Shashi, waited impatiently for their mom. When she showed up, her nose was thrust upward. "You know I only like anchovies," she growled. "So sue me," I replied. She threw me a smoldering look and went to pour herself some wine. The kids giggled and squinted at their mother. When she ran out, the kids and I discussed schoolwork and social events like play dates and such. That night, it was as cold as the South Pole, and I had to get another blanket. We hadn't been close for a long time, about 3 months. The next day, the situation worsened. I consulted an attorney to explore my options. She had no tolerance for cheaters, especially unfaithful wives, and was inclined to sympathize with police officers. However, she warned me that we lived in a state that adopted a no-fault system, and therefore, regardless of the circumstances, I would be at a disadvantage if my wife did not agree to my terms. She advised me to gather all available evidence. The attorney also mentioned that in terms of alimony, I am in a good position because my wife earns more than me. Also, because of her age, my oldest daughter could choose which parent she wanted to live with. I then met with a private investigator, a good friend and former colleague of mine, and organized surveillance of my wife and her lover. Since he was my friend, the costs were reasonable and I was able to get all the evidence I needed. After that, I went to an electronics store and bought some wireless recording devices and 3 video cameras. At home, I installed the cameras in the living room, guest room, and master bedroom. I planned to place one of the recording devices in her car, one on the bookshelf in the living room, and another in the master bedroom. Later, I received a text from my wife apologizing for the delay and asking me to take care of the kids until she got home. I came home from work to make dinner. 2 hours later, my older kids came home and we discussed the menu together. "How about grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and creamed spinach?" I asked. Marissa replied that it sounded delicious. Junior grinned and asked what Mom wanted for dinner. I replied that Mom would eat dinner by herself tonight. Marissa and Junior looked at each other and then Marissa said, "Daddy, we need to talk." I figured a conversation was about to start and we went into the kitchen together to make dinner. "Dad, I think Mom is cheating on you. She doesn't respect you and she's never around when we need her," Marissa began. "That's true, Dad," the son added. "I'm glad we inherited good looks and intelligence." I stopped, gathered the kids around me, and hugged them. Their little sister immediately joined us. I professed my love for them, emphasizing that it was even stronger than my ego. I expressed my concern about their mother's actions, but reminded them that we would all make it through any difficulties together. "Dad, maybe we should get a paternity test," Junior suggested. "It would help sort out the situation. My feelings for you won't change, but it will shed some light on Mom's actions," he said. I was amazed at their candor and sympathized with their pain. "Okay, let's do it," I agreed. Before my wife returned, I took cheek swabs from all the kids, sealed them and stashed them in my briefcase. The next day, I sent the samples to an independent lab. It cost extra money, but I needed a quick answer. A week and a half later, the results came back. None of the children were my biological children. Despite my reluctance, I had to attend my wife's company party at her boss's house in honor of Independence Day. She was a top salesperson and needed my presence. I had with me pictures, notes, videos, receipts, and DNA test results proving her relationship with her lover. I hadn't yet decided on the best way or moment to expose myself, feeling I had already lost. She said it wasn't going to be a family event, so no kids were invited. Thinking back, it was for the best. We arrived around 11 a.m. and grabbed drinks. Bourbon for me, white wine for her. She was in a yellow sundress with no bra, espadrilles and shawl, looking stunning. I stayed close by, not following her every move, but keeping an eye on her. Her boss walked over, chatted with her, whispering sweet nothings in her ear before returning to his hosting duties and disappearing. I stepped up my surveillance of Caroline. She was looking around the neighborhood, and after her third glass of wine, she lost sight of me. She didn't like alcohol and was close to intoxication. Noticing her grabbing another glass of wine, I watched her slip away to the far end of the property where the house was located. Two of her coworkers tried to distract me, but I switched to a Coke and followed her as she headed for the corner of the garden shed and disappeared behind it. Placing the Coke on the table, I pulled out my cell phone and turned on the video camera. Sneaking around the corner of the shed, I went unnoticed and headed for the gate at the back of the building. As I peeked around the corner, I saw my wife and witnessed her cheating. I won't go into details, but the situation looked horrible. Obviously, both of them were enjoying it. At that moment, I realized that what once belonged to me was no longer mine. I took a few pictures and walked closer. When I reached him, I grabbed him by his ridiculously masculine hair and pulled him away from my wife. After turning him around to face me, I delivered a powerful right punch to his face, shattering his nose and breaking his left cheekbone, injuring my arm in the process. He fell to the ground unconscious. While Caroline collapsed near the barn, I quickly retrieved the handcuffs and secured him to the fence post, reading him his rights. You are under arrest for harassment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. I spoke as her screams of confusion split the air. You also have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, an attorney will be provided for you, I continued. Caroline tried to stand up, gripped by panic. I dialed 911 on my cell phone and waited for help to arrive. 911 service, what happened to you? They asked. This is Detective Craig Johnson, badge number 714. I'm located at 6132 Larson Street. I've apprehended a suspect who was apparently soliciting a female. Immediate assistance is needed, I explained, adding that on-duty officers on scene, ambulance, and backup are required. Caroline was furious. It's not what you think. He didn't molest me, she exclaimed. Caroline, this is assault. I have video, audio, photographs, receipts, timelines of your location, and DNA samples of our 3 children proving they are not mine. Either you cooperate or you will never see your children again. You're embarrassing them, I said as her face turned pale. Caroline fell to the ground screaming in frustration. I rushed to help her up. However, she whispered that she needed to retrieve her underwear. I replied that it needed to be examined by forensics, and together we headed toward the patio through the backyard. As we approached the small group of 10 people outside, they suddenly fell silent, then expressed shock and stepped aside. I led Caroline into the empty living room where she sat down. 2 of her slightly drunken friends approached, shouting, asking what had happened and what I had done to her. I replied that I had done nothing, that she had been attacked by her boss. Donna yelled indignantly, asking if I heard her. Laura shouted that Caroline had talked about having an open marriage and that I supposedly agreed with it. I stated that this was a lie, and it was at that moment that the police arrived. I asked 2 officers to check the shed and reread the rights to the detainee, as I was not sure if he had heard me the first time. The sergeant on duty arrived along with another patrol officer. I instructed one of the officers to take statements and addresses from Donna and Laura. The perpetrator's wife pushed through the crowd demanding to know what was going on. The sergeant explained that her husband had been arrested and gave her the details. She flared up, lost her temper, and tried to attack Caroline, who was in a state of shock. At this point, the police intervened and the paramedics arrived. I briefly described the situation to them, and they placed Caroline on a stretcher. A small puddle was left underneath her and tears were streaming down her face. I asked them to take her to the trauma center for examination and further charges against her abuser. That's when the other police officers took Arthur outside. His face was swollen and his hands were handcuffed behind his back. He carelessly stated that there had been an understanding between him and my wife and that the meeting had been consensual. His words were overheard by his wife, who, unrestrained by emotion, vented her anger on him. The police detained her again after she threatened legal action and said that he would find out from her lawyer. I followed them into the interrogation room, filling out all the necessary paperwork for Caroline since she was still my legal spouse. I then went to the police station and filed a complaint against him. Since it was Saturday, he would not be charged until Monday. He tried to contact his lawyer, but it was too late. His wife had managed to dial him. Back in the ER, I visited my soon-to-be ex-wife, Caroline. She looked visibly upset and anxious. At the sight of me, she tried to smile, but upon noticing my expression, she recoiled. "Caroline, how long has this been going on?" I asked. She trembled and tears came to her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be serious, just a brief affair. I didn't intend it to be," she said. "Oh, Caroline," I walked over to her and stopped in front of her face. "Marissa isn't mine. Junior isn't mine. Junior isn't mine. It's 17 years. We've been married 17 years. Do the math. Hell, you should be one of the top sellers." "Why, Caroline?" Her tears were quickly replaced by a smirk as she wiped her eyes. "Because I can. You're a detective, figure it out. I can have any man I want and you know nothing." I stared at the one who would soon become my ex-wife, feeling something inside me die. My eyes pierced her with icy detachment. She seemed to have aged a century, her presence faintly pale. "Oh God, what's wrong with me?" I thought. Gently taking her hand, I walked her to the car and sat her in the passenger seat. I got behind the wheel and headed towards Caroline's parents' house. She stared blankly out the window the entire way. When we pulled up to the house, she broke the silence. "What are we doing here?" "I want to go home." I replied sharply, "People in hell want ice water." I got out of the car, helped her out and walked her to the front door. Pressing the doorbell, we waited. The door opened and standing on the doorstep was her father, Frank. "Your daughter needs to stay here for a while," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow to explain everything. She just came out of the emergency room. Please take care of her." He looked at me in disbelief. I turned and walked away. I turned off my phone and walked home. At home, my children greeted me with the question, "Where's Mom?" "She's with your grandparents, staying there for a while," I explained. I told them the situation, avoiding the gruesome details. After some tears and sobs, they accepted it, understanding my actions but puzzled by her behavior. I thought about the documents I had collected, including reports, photographs, private investigators' files, and receipts pertaining to her. I put everything into 4 bags, including DNA results, after consulting with an attorney. I initiated divorce proceedings and requested a restraining order, citing the police report and harassment kit. I provided the DNA results to the attorney separately. I then drove to the home of the figurehead and spoke with his wife, Laura. I apologized for the inconvenience and she expressed sympathy for me. I handed her a packet of documents and advised her to use whatever she found useful. She hesitated but thanked me nonetheless. After that, I left and headed home. On the way, I stopped at my in-law's house. I handed one of the packages to my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, saying that his daughter was in a difficult situation and needed professional help. Having said that, I left. The next day, after attending church, we went to Denny's for breakfast. I kept my phone off all day and night. Monday morning, I went to work and found out the arraignment schedule for the man who disgusted me. I attended the arraignment. The defendant's attorney argued that there was consensual intimacy between the two and denied the harassment charges. At the hearing, the testimony of 2 women from the party was played. The judge, skeptical, dismissed the charges with the possibility of reconsideration if circumstances changed. When the defendant saw me, he smirked, but his expression quickly changed when he was handed legal documents, including a restraining order from an attorney hired by his wife. As I left the building, I couldn't contain my smirk in response. The situation had not yet been fully resolved. Returning home, I brought with me the documents from the harassment case, copies of the police report, and the results of the DNA test. As I was on the phone with my attorney, there was a knock on my front door. I knew only one person knocked like that instead of ringing the doorbell. It was Anthony, Caroline's older brother, who was only 3 years older and ran his own construction company. There were rumors of his ties to the mafia. His son had had a drug problem some time ago, and I had used my influence, mostly legal, to help him. After the young man got into the program and got clean, he was well into his 3rd year of seminary and was doing well. It's safe to say that I was his favorite uncle by marriage, so this visit was probably more than just a formality. Tony walked past me, greeted my children and his wife Theresa and their 3 children. After freeing himself from their embrace, he turned to me and suggested we talk on the back porch. We went outside and he asked me what was going on. Caroline is pissed. Mom and Dad have it out, and Dad is pissed. Did she explain anything to you? I asked. He replied that after her dad showed her the evidence you provided him, she avoided talking and refused to explain anything. I explained that Caroline had been cheating on me for 17 years and that none of my children were biologically mine. She probably doesn't know who Marissa's or Junior's real father is either. Junior's father is her current boss, Arthur Dash. Plus, she has another child with another man, and she's pregnant, but not with me. Your father knows everything I know except that there's a lawsuit against her that will be filed this week. Tony collapsed into his chair, his face expressing devastation. That's completely unacceptable and horrible what you said, he pointed out. I explained that the charges against her lover, who I call a jerk, had been dropped and his wife had gotten all the paperwork I had. I didn't mean to be harsh on your parents, Tony, but given your sister's behavior, I didn't want them to be kept in the dark. She really needs professional help. I realize this is a bit of a shock, I said. We talked some more before he got up to leave. What's the plan of action with this asshole? He asked. I'm not sure anything I do won't backfire on me, I said. I know what you want to do, but no offense, she's not worth going to jail over, he said. Tony looked me straight in the eye and said, Don't worry, I can handle it. You're still family, it won't affect you. I won't hurt my sister, but he'll get his. It'll settle the score. I begged Tony not to take any action, to which he didn't respond. Then he turned and walked away before I could say anything else. On Thursday, my wife was taken to her parents' house. She collapsed and was rushed to the emergency room. She stayed in the hospital for about a week before returning to her parents' house. Her father came up to me and asked if there was a way to reconcile. Didn't you see what I gave you? I asked. Yes, but obviously she made a mistake, he replied. I yelled, scratching the car was a mistake. Forgetting to deposit the check was a mistake. Having an affair for 17 years, getting pregnant by another man, passing her child off as yours and hiding intimacy from her husband is not a mistake. I was relieved that the children were not at home when I spoke to their grandfather. After I calmed down, I asked him to have her sign the papers I had finalized. He wasn't happy with either of us. It turned out that 3 weeks ago, she was the majority owner of Dash for tax purposes. Consequently, she wasn't too worried and adjusted her claim to reflect the change. The divorce proceedings continued, but now stretched over a year. Caroline was 2 months pregnant, so we had to wait another 7 months to finalize everything. We waited as time went on. Her lawyer tried to renegotiate the terms of the agreement, arguing that she deserved more. I offered to let her keep the house and offered a 10% compensation. She kept her 401, and our children's visitation rights were limited to 1 weekend every 2 months at her parents' house, with no other male or female companions present. Other than Marissa, who refused to see her mother, no one else objected to the meetings. Each semester I instructed my attorney to arrange a meeting. I would arrive at my attorney's office a half hour before the scheduled time, pop a DVD into the projector, grab a cup of coffee, and sit down. Admit that you don't need to introduce yourself, my wife's attorney offered, keeping it polite and casting a stern look at his client. The negotiations lasted 4 hours and made no progress. I vetoed several items and waived others, whereupon she exploded, accusing me of being unreasonable. Then I asked her a question, answer honestly, and maybe I'll reconsider my decision. I pressed the play button on the DVD player. The footage showed Carolyn and her lover leaving the Holiday Inn. This footage was captured by my police car's DVR. She hadn't seen it before and didn't know it existed. The video played until she pulled out her blue lacy lingerie, I stopped it and turned to her. "Carolyn, where are the panties I gave you for your anniversary, my dear wife? Where the hell are they? If you don't sign, we'll go to court and this will all go public. Sign it," she cried, grabbed a pen and signed the whole thing. Her lawyer was stunned as she grabbed her purse, stood up and got water. Then she broke down and screamed. We called an ambulance and took her to the hospital. I made sure my name wasn't on the birth certificate. She gave birth to a boy weighing 6 pounds 7 ounces. My attorney demanded a DNA test, and it turned out he wasn't mine. Furthermore, it was the child of another man she was cheating on her lover with. The divorce was finalized and I was finally free. Suddenly, I was in demand in the dating market. My daughter even called me handsome. My son warned me to look around, joking that I might be ambushed. I visited my son-in-law and we had a couple pints of beer. In the course of the evening, he asked about other women. He raised an eyebrow, but I'd brushed it off. My few dates lately hadn't touched my heart. 2 years later, Tony and Teresa threw a barbecue and invited everyone, including my ex-wife. The kids kept their distance from her. The man she brought along with her young son turned out to be quite charming and won my daughter's affections. My 18-year-old daughter brought along a friend of hers who I felt passed the test, although I did not venture to admit it. The man accompanying my ex-wife was clearly showing interest in my daughter. I noticed this, but decided not to interfere so as not to embarrass her. However, when he persistently began to approach her, I was ready to intervene. At that moment, her own friend arrived. "What's going on, honey?" he asked. She objected. "Oh, sorry." The man tried to approach her, and his hand began to move closer to her. She firmly demanded, "Get your hands off me." Before he could respond, she incapacitated him with a punch and a maneuver that resulted in a broken thumb. His screams drew everyone's attention. "I'm not held to my mother's standards," she said. Her boyfriend couldn't hold back a smile. "That's my girl," I encouraged her to myself as I watched the fight. Her mother ran up and screamed, "What have you done?" Her son-in-law, who had witnessed the whole incident, intervened and advised, "I think you two should leave." After the party guests left, the atmosphere became calmer. Suddenly, a new guest appeared. My sister-in-law immediately went over to a tall brunette with a graceful figure and long legs, as if she didn't run out, and hugged her. She then brought this gorgeous lady over to me and introduced her. "Craig, let me introduce you to my sister Angelina. Angelina recently moved here. She has a 10-year-old son and is a lawyer who started a new company after her husband passed away in Afghanistan." Teresa looked me straight in the eye and said, "I told her all about you. Maybe you can help each other." Angelina looked at me and suggested, "Why don't we have a sip of coffee?"
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely answer you personally.